Welcome to the Real Estate Explainer podcast, where we talk about anything and everything real estate. I'm your host, Brian Kiksula. Today, we've got Kelly Koontz on the podcast talking about submetering. Hey, Kelly, just want to say thank you for joining me on the podcast. Today is kind of a unique subject, submetering. As a cost segregation professional, I work with clients across the United States that are buying multifamily homes. They're buying apartment complexes. And as you know, typically, the gas and the electric can be stacked all into one bill. And it's just because of the way the buildings were built. I owned a condo in Del Mar, California. And even as a condo owner, we were still separating our water bills with the rest of the tenants. And it was crazy because Del Mar had its own little water district, and it was literally through the roof, as far as our cost goes. So if you could just kind of tell the audience, what is submetering?
Yeah. Well, hi, Brian. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast. I would love to talk about submetering and give some information to your folks that this is applicable to. You were mentioning that classic utility that comes to a property owner or manager, one single bill for the entire property, whether that's water, sewer, gas, even sometimes electric. And that tends to be one of the largest expenses on your P&L if you own that property. And you have some choices on how you're going to try to recover that from your residents, your tenants. And many folks, and historically, they try to capture that by just adding it to their monthly rent, maybe $50, $60 extra a month, and hope that covers everything. Over the last couple decades, there's been some movements towards separating that cost out.
Absolutely. If you're a tenant, you are renting an apartment, you're probably already thinking the rent's too high already.
Yep, you're right on. So you can make your rent more attractive if you break that out, but you still have to figure out what that's going to be. Some folks will use a ratio-based calculation. Our industry calls that RUBS. Some of your listeners may be familiar with that. You take the bill, you split it up using a mathematical method that could be based on occupants. Somebody with 3 people in a unit are going to pay a little more than a single occupant unit. All of that is still very much disconnected from the actual use of the utility. So a single tenant unit can still be a very high water usage person, for instance. And so you're really, at best, trying to approximate that as you're recovering those costs. So what we like to offer is the best option of what we call submetering. We're actually going to put a utility meter on each unit and measure their actual usage. And then based on that data, we can create a bill for each individual resident and then actually bill that resident for what they really use.
So you're not using a software approach where you're saying based on 30 tenants, this would be your cut of the water bill, which would completely be unrealistic because not everybody has the same water usage. For example, in my household, we run the washer and dryer every single day.
Exactly right. And if you use that example of that 30 unit property, everybody is paying for a little of those big users. Maybe there's a couple units that have a toilet flapper that's running. Everybody's going to be paying for that extra water that those 1 or 2 toilets are creating, which can be very significant. So by submetering, now you're zeroing in on exactly the usage for each individual resident, and they get to pay exactly their fair share. So it really comes down for the owner able to recover all their costs still, but do it in a way where everything's fair based on usage, and the resident is empowered now because they have control. They can decide how big or small their bill is as well.
Well, I'm thinking more of a property owner. So I own a 100-unit apartment complex or a 30-unit multifamily building. I think the real benefit for me is now the rents that I'm generating are actually going to rent. It's not going back to the utilities. So that has to have a huge impact on the overall value of the property and your bottom line month after month.
You're spot on. By adding a submetering system and then effectively charging residents and collecting that money, this is a huge direct impact on your ROI. You're going to see this on your bottom line. You're going to see your cap rates improve. And we see that across the board. We can do a quick analysis with somebody who's considering going from RUBS or even nothing at all, trying to capture that in the usage fee. And typically our return on investments are less than a year. They can be less than a year.
Now, I'm also talking about 30 to 100 unit. The reality is most owners across the United States, or a lot of my clients that are buying and selling properties, they're buying single family homes. So this is a non-issue on single family properties, but certainly as a duplex, maybe a duplex, all of a sudden it's a real problem because let's face it, in a lot of areas, what they're doing is they're going in and they're doing ADUs or they're chopping up the units. So now you've got a garage unit. You're just really breaking that property up. What's the minimum property look like? What is the smallest unit? Would it be a duplex? Would it be a triplex? Or are you looking at larger properties?
Super good question, Brian. For a couple decades, there's been a submetering industry out there that loves to get that 100, 200 unit apartment complex up and running. Our company particularly has really recognized that submetering can be beneficial to anyone at any size. So to answer your question directly, we put systems in duplexes, triplexes, 4, 5, 6 unit properties. Every week, we're selling systems for properties that small. And the equipment and the reading systems, you're getting all of the same services that 100 unit apartment building is getting and all the advantages of splitting up those utility bills based on actual usage. So there's no property too small, right down to a duplex.
And you said it's about a 12-month payback period. So there's definitely equipment that needs to be installed on the individual property. And I know that's a big concern with a lot of clients that are coming in and they're doing fix and flips, maybe a new owner that's coming in and having to pay the cost to set this up. But I guess in the end, it's really about improving or stabilizing your property as a whole. Because like I said a second ago, is now the rents that you're collecting are going towards rents. They're not going towards water bills. I mean, we're talking water, but you also mentioned electricity. You can break it up into electric as well.
Water, gas, electric. We can even do, in some instances, if you've got a hydronic heating system, for instance, that is being powered with gas or electricity, we have equipment and tools that can split that up as well.
I'd like to thank today's sponsor, CostSeg RX, a cost segregation company. If you're interested in a cost segregation study, log on to realestateexplainer.com and click the cost segregation link at the top of the page. Okay, so walk me through this. So I contact you. Once I want to move forward, are you then sending your team out to the property to do the install? And how much of a heavy lift is this? Are you having to replumb? Are you having to pull the panel board on the side of your house to plug this in?
Great question. We get a lot of our folks that contact us say, boy, that sounds pretty good, but this has got to be super expensive, right? And I think in almost all cases, people are pleasantly surprised at how straightforward this is. Yeah, there's some costs, but let me walk your listeners through with that. First of all, every property has its own story. It's a bit unique. And you mentioned that, for instance, if we stick with water, which is usually the most common utility we're submetering, it could be an older building with stacked riser plumbing and back-to-back kitchens. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, there's no way we can submeter that. The water isn't split out by unit. But in most of those cases, the hot water is generated from a hot water tank, hot water heater in each individual unit, which means the hot water is separated. So we can put a water meter on even in those older buildings that have that type of a plumbing situation. Now we're measuring the hot water usage only in every unit, but that's far better than nothing at all. And we can use that as with an allocation methodology to split the bill up. And that's very popular, very accurate on the hot water, and it's not expensive. So in terms of some simple costs, the meters that we use for water are all utility grade, high-end meters with some remote reading capabilities. They use some wireless technology, and the individual cost per unit for the equipment is about $120 per unit. And then there's usually one gateway that's at the property that's going to installation and whatnot. For small property, it's going to be less than $2,000 for that. So if you have a 5-unit property, you're going to be in on hardware for not much more than about $3,000.
All right. So that's really affordable. And that makes perfect sense too with the hot water, because that was my concern. I go to site inspections on these older buildings, whether it's in the Northeast or really anywhere in the country. And you're absolutely right. They've got one plumbed in line. And the only thing that's really separating most of them is their individual 30-gallon hot water tank. And that's really the only place that I would see that you would be able to capture the water component of it.
And then to follow on your question, that meter's got to get installed. So we're going to work with a plumber. Depending on where you're located, we do business all over the United States. It's always best to have a local plumber to use. If you don't know one, we'll help you find one. We'll train them and let them know what to do. Actually, in that we call hot water allocation-based methodology, that's actually one of the least expensive installations because the meter can just go on the supply line right at that hot water tank. You're not usually cutting into walls, and it can be as little as $100, $200 per unit to make that installation.
For the install per unit. All right. So that's affordable. I mean, when you're looking at any appliance in the unit is costing several $100s already. So that's absolutely makes sense. Now, how does the electric work? We've talked about splitting that. Is that similar to a water? I imagine it'd be a little bit different because you're not tapping into the line. So then it would be more of an allocation approach?
Nope. Well, we would put an electric meter on the units. When we think electric meters, most of us think of that, what we call jelly jar socket meter that's on the outside of your home.
I just replaced mine last year. It melted right after a hurricane. So I know exactly what they are.
Right. The good news is our industry has developed other type of very accurate electric meters that can be installed right at the circuit panels. And so they're non-invasive. They use a device called a current transformer that slides right over the circuit panel wire. So whether you're isolating a small sub panel or you're even isolating individual circuits from a panel, these are easy to install meters. A single meter point is usually only about $250 to $350.
So it's literally capturing the amount of electricity that unit's pulling right at the sub panel for that unit.
Right. And then that, whether it's an electric meter, water meter, or a gas meter, they all are sending that data to that meter reading system. So there's a gateway on that property as well. That data is pushed up to the cloud. And then we have access to that data if we're helping you with your billing, or you have access to that as the property owner manager as well.
And that was going to be one of my questions next, is who's sending the bill?
Right.
And again, it just gets back to the tenant saying, hey, I'm already paying too much in rent. And as an apartment owner, the challenge is you don't want to have to increase rents every year to cover water bills. And everywhere in the country right now is experiencing increased in electricity cost, increase in water bills. So if you're trying to figure out what you're going to charge your tenants in rent, and you're going to have to build that onto it, it could be complicated. And then
you're always in the back, running behind too, trying to catch up. You're not.
Yeah, you're always running behind. And then again, in the tenant's perspective, they're already paying too much in their eyes. And if you've got to increase the rent, or if you've got to send them an individual water bill or electric bill, you're the bad guy again. Right. So I really like the fact that you can take over billing. So you can actually handle the billing for the investors.
Yep, we sure can. That's the second part of our business. So we get that system in place. Now we have the option to actually do that billing. A couple of really key important things that your listeners want to know about that billing service is, number one, and this is a industry standard, and it's very important. Your property owners know that you're only recovering the actual costs. So you're not trying to make this a profit center for you and mark up the cost of the water or the electricity. This is we're taking the exact charges that the utility is charging the building. We're splitting those up based on the on the data coming out of the meters, and then we're passing those costs along to residents. So it's very open, and the residents have access to seeing how that works if need be. But to your point, it's not you or the property owner that is the bad guys. Those rates go up. This is just passing on the utility costs.
And I think that's perfect. You really want to protect both parties here. And I think that that's the best way to do it. So it's good that they've got the laws in place or the rules in place. So you can't have bad actors out there inflating electric rates or water bills. You're just passing it straight forward. And then you're handling that, for them.
It's well said. So what we do with that process, we will collect those costs from the utility. We'll pull those reads from the cloud-based data. We'll run that through our billing software. We'll prepare an individual bill that breaks down all the individual costs of base fees, water, sewer. We can add trash. We can put pet fees on there if you've got that and you'd like the resident to receive that. There's no extra cost to add any of those types of fees onto the bill as well. And then that bill is sent to the resident via mail or email. And then depending on what the owner manager wants to do, the bill can be set up to say, remit your payment directly to the owner, and they can receive the money and keep track of the accounting within their own process. Or if you'd like, we will have them remit the payment to us, and we'll do all of that banking and bookkeeping. And then once a month, we reimburse what we receive from the residents to the property owner. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts on how that works. If you think about that, it says, well, that must be expensive. Well, if you've got a building with 25 or more units, the answer to that is it's completely free to you, the owner, because we're going to put a little $4 or $5 billing service fee on the bill, and the resident's going to pay us for that service that we're providing. If you're a smaller property, maybe you've got a fourplex and you'd still like us to do the billing, we certainly can and do that for a number of smaller properties. We do have a monthly minimum. So you're going to recover some of those costs from the residents, but there may be a out-of-pocket cost if it's a very small property.
Got it. And, I'd say a lot of the property owners that I work with, they are the smaller property owners, just they own duplexes, quads, maybe up to 6 units. And they own dozens of them. So they don't maybe own that one large apartment complex. They own a bunch of smaller units. So it's good that you can work with both the larger and the smaller clients there.
Yeah. And if you have those smaller property listeners and they like the whole idea of submetering, they think that this makes total sense, but I don't really want to pay any monthly costs out of pocket for my fourplex, then great. We will set you up where you can access the data yourself. It's free. That's part of what the hardware costs allow you to freely access that data from the cloud. And then if you are the kind of person that can work on a Sunday every month and pull a spreadsheet out and calculate that yourself, you're welcome to handle that yourself. So that doesn't keep you away from the advantages of taking advantage of the submetering if you want to do that yourself on a small property.
So another thing that I see out there often is a lot of guys are wholesaling properties. So they're coming in, they're wholesaling them, or they're fixing and flipping them. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing guys that are fixing and flipping the properties approach you to install the meters and then again to start to stabilize the rents and then to sell it off?
We have a really significant percentage of clients that contact us that say, yeah, I just bought this property, and as part of my investment in upgrades, we're super interested in adding a metering system. So yes, whether they buy it to keep or they buy it to flip, this is on the list of improvements that we regularly see investors want to make at their properties.
Yeah, and I'd even see commercial real estate agents or folks that are syndicating properties could take advantage of the service and at least let their buyers know that this is something that's out there for them. If they're not planning on adding the meters themselves because they're not planning on holding the properties very long, it seems to me like it would be a great fit or a good selling point when you're looking at the overall performance of the property.
And it just makes it more attractive. It literally makes it more valuable just to have that metering system in place.
Perfect. Now, we didn't touch on gas at all, just because I have no idea how you would calculate gas. Is that the same as with electric? They can measure the pull, How does gas
Yep.
work?
Gas meters are in line typically, or well, I'll give you an option to that. But most of the time, we're selling a small or a medium-sized gas meter that can be as small as an apartment-based one that's going to run about $250 per unit. It's going to be connected up to that same wireless reading system that pushes the data up to the cloud. So think about that as your individual cost of hardware. And we have some clients that say, well, the only gas appliance we have are gas fireplaces. I've got a 20 unit property and they all have a gas fireplace. It's all the same model with a switch on the wall that you flip up and down. It's either on or off. Well, we even have some electronic options which connect to the ignition circuitry on the gas fireplace that just literally counts the number of seconds or minutes in a month that it's on versus off. So we can use that as a ratio-based way of calculating the gas bill and splitting it up. And the individual hardware costs on that are less than $200 per unit.
Okay. And it's all getting pushed back to the same software
Correct.
that you have. Okay. So that makes perfect sense. So it's all dialing back, it's getting collected, and then you're feeding it out to the client so they can see exactly what it is.
Right. And one thing we haven't touched on, Brian, but I want to make clear is whether it's a water meter or a gas meter or this gas fireplace electronic device or an electric meter, they can be installed in every individual unit, but they're going to be paired with a wireless transceiver. So there's no need to run wires from every meter to anything. This is all done with wireless technology. That transceiver has got a lithium battery that's rated for 7 to 10 years, and it will tell you when it's running low. So the system will give you a warning that says, hey, it's time to go cycle through and change that $4 battery 7 years out from now. So that's how that technology works. It's super mature technology, super reliable, and we're experts on that. So if you had a larger building, we can help you with making sure that the equipment's all installed in the right spot, and that part of it's going to be very foolproof.
Okay. Yeah. I think all around, it sounds like a perfect opportunity for anybody who invests in multifamily property to take advantage of. Most multifamily properties that I've been to, it's all under one bill. The owner gets stuck with it. So for you to be able to split it up for the property owner, it just seems like a win-win.
One last thing to really share with your listeners, Brian, is that one of the recent innovations in our industry has been that, and I mentioned earlier, that pesky toilet flapper leak that could be up in some of your residence units. I don't know if your listeners realize, but we've done very typical calculations on that. And those can cost upwards of $200 a month in water sewer for a very common toilet flapper that's hanging. And so that's real money. And it could be coming out of your pocket.
Could be a vacant unit that's just running.
Exactly. The cool thing about the reading system that we have is it's going to see if water is running constantly. And after about 24 hours, it's got an algorithm that says, hey, unit 212 is running, it has got a problem. It's a suspected leak. We're going to send an email or a text alert to the property manager that says, you need to go check out unit 212. We think there's a leak there. And that's really powerful. We've now had some clients that love the fact that they can collect the data and bill back for the cost, but they're buying these systems just for the leak detection.
Yeah, I would buy it as a property owner, a residential property owner. I had my hot water heater blew about 6 months ago, flooded out my back room, ruined all the flooring in my house. And I wish I would have had someone sending me a text message as soon as that thing started running for anything over 30 minutes. Right. Let me know that there's an issue, because nobody's taking a shower for 30 minutes. There should be no other reason that the water is just going. So right. The leak detection, I just think, is huge. That's an absolute win.
It's just a little more about that. So the type of leak detection I described is using the water meter that's been installed. And it's great. You're not finding out about this 45 days late. You're going to hear about it 1 or 2 days late. That doesn't solve the overflowing bathtub or toilet, but we have additional equipment that would handle that, where you would literally get in 2 minutes after a flood, an alarm via email. And it's using the same technology that the meters are communicating on. So it's the same platform. It's inexpensive. And if you have listeners that are interested in that as an add-on to their metering system, we can help with that too.
Yeah, perfect. And to wrap everything up, I just wanted to say, how can clients get in touch with you if they're interested in submetering? I know that you guys work across the country. You're based out of Washington. I'm out here in Florida. Can you service everybody in the US? And then what is the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, our company again is Submeter Solutions. We're just outside of Seattle, but we do work all over the country. And again, just to really put a point on it, that no property is too small for us. So maybe you've contacted somebody in our industry that's got a 50 unit or more limit because they don't like to deal with small properties. We would love to talk to you. So they can reach out to us via our website, or our phone numbers listed on our website, Submeter Solutions with an S at the end.com. And if your listeners actually go to that website, submetersolutions.com/podcast, they'll get on a landing page that they can fill out some brief information, contact information, and one of our sales folks will give you a call. What typically we can do is, with just a 5-minute phone call of collecting some information over the phone, that's typically enough for us to work up a proposal for your situation that's going to be right to the penny what the costs are going to be. Maybe not the installation part, but certainly all the hardware part. And we'd be happy to talk to you about it. If you have questions, give us a call.
Well, hey, thank you very much for jumping on the podcast with me today.
It's been my pleasure, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to get connected with today's guest, log on to realestateexplainer.com and click the Get Connected button on the homepage.